I'm pleased to come back here as a former member of this committee. I think I served on it for 10 years and sat beside Chairman Dodd and worked with Senator Shelby in that period of time. And I have long advocated the need for us to try to address the question of America's infrastructure. Infrastructure is a horrible word. It's a lost word to many citizens, but when you see a bridge fall down over the Mississippi, or you see airports clogged and our lack of adequate generation of radar and other things that we face, people begin to understand it. The truth is, Mr. Chairman, that we are living off our grandparents' and parents' responsibility, sense of responsibility. We're living off prior generations' willingness to invest in America. There's a great book called The Power Broker about Robert Moses in New York, and it's a tremendous tale of how the Triborough Authority and all of the great bridges and roads that connected New York to Long Island and upstate New York and elsewhere provided for the economic development growth of that state. The fact is that I believe a national infrastructure bank is the essential way for our country to catch up to the enormous infrastructure deficit that we face in this country. Rising economic powers around the world, our competitors, China, India, Brazil, Mexico, other countries, are all investing in their future. And they're all investing in their future much more significantly than the United States. The truth is, we are moving at our current rate towards a secondary competitive status because of our inattention to the infrastructure of our country. Now, there are a lot of ideas about the best way forward. I think we have to be candid in the beginning of this discussion and make it clear. Building infrastructure doesn't come on the cheap, but it's clear that the most efficient way that we could galvanize the private sector to actually provide the investment, rather than a big government approach, is in fact to create an infrastructure bank for the United States. Already a diverse bipartisan group supports the idea of a national infrastructure bank, including the Chamber of Commerce, the AFL-CIO, SEIU. So I believe that if we create new and strong incentives for investment here in the building blocks for economic competitiveness, all of which are key to America remaining a great economic power, the roads, the bridges, the rail, aviation, other essential infrastructure. You know, countless communities. I was visiting Fall River, Massachusetts the other day. They have a combined sewer overflow requirement by the courts. The courts have ordered it. They don't have the tax base. They have no ability to be able to build this on their own. Already, families that can't afford it are paying an additional $800 for a system that the court has ordered that lasted over 100 years, and they're going to be building it for the next 100 years. But none of that is reflected in the financing structure, which is all immediate and all sort of pay-as-you-go in the current budget. President Eisenhower recognized when he built the National Highway System that it was good to bet on American ingenuity and American economic capacity, and it strengthened our hand in the Cold War. Frankly, all of our infrastructure issues, whether it's our grid, which is barely existent as a national grid, or our lack of adequate ability to move people by rail. After 9/11, remember, the only way you could really move people was by rail for the first few days. The truth is that infrastructure is directly related to America's economic strength, and economic strength is directly related to our projection of power on a global basis. Now, we're going to disagree sometimes, as we all know. We're seeing it well exploited in the current political context, the question of the appropriate size of government. I think we all agree that a smaller government is better and that you want to try to reduce the size of bureaucracy and so forth. We shouldn't get tangled up in the demagoguery that surrounds that issue. Americans don't want big government, but I'll tell you what they do want. They want a government that works for them effectively. They want as much government as it takes to be safe and secure on roads, on bridges, and rail and highways and air travel. And businesses want as much government as required to efficiently and cheaply move goods, products to market. And that means upgrading our nation's highway system, our rail, our maritime, our aviation, and modernizing our electric grid. Now, just to get a picture of how much we need this, Mr. Chairman, in 2008, the National Surface Transportation Policy and Revenue Study Commission called for an annual investment in our country in infrastructure of $250 billion a year from federal, state, local governments for the next 50 years in order to meet just the bottom standard of what we need to bring our infrastructure up to par. We're talking about staggering sums of money here, and it clearly reflects how much we've neglected our infrastructure, and it clearly reflects the path of deterioration that we're on. Well-functioning infrastructure is not a luxury. It's the key to connecting and protecting our people and to creating millions of middle-class jobs for American workers over the long term, though it is not a jobs bill. That is the ancillary sort of side benefit of doing this. It is a bill directly related to economic strength, directly related to competitive strength, and directly related to national security. It's vital to our economic future in the face of global competition. Quite simply, we're falling behind our main economic competitors, and the further we fall behind in this race, the harder it is to catch up and the easier it is for companies to decide, well, I'm not going to locate my company there because it costs me so much more to move my goods. It's so much more difficult to affect business. I'm going to go somewhere where they've got a modern infrastructure capacity. China's 2009 infrastructure spending is estimated to be 9% of GDP, or $350 billion a year, and growing at an annual rate of 20%. China's highway mileage is expected to surpass the United States in under 3 years. Europe's infrastructure bank, they have one, the European Investment Bank, financed $350 billion in projects from just 2005 to 2009 across Europe, across the continent, helping to modernize seaports, expand airports, build railroad lines, and reconfigure city centers. Brazil has invested over $240 billion in their infrastructure in the past 3 years alone, with an additional $340 billion planned in the next 3 years. They've unveiled major initiatives to invest in infrastructure ahead of hosting the World Cup and the Olympics, and incidentally, the Infrastructure Bank was a central part of their strategy in attracting the World Cup and the Olympics, and they are using their Infrastructure Bank as a key tool to finance this massive expansion. So to get back into the game, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, we need something more than the municipal bond market system, which is already struggling to support over 80% of the infrastructure investment in the United States. A national infrastructure bank would complement existing infrastructure programs, not compete with it. This is not in lieu of the highway bill, not in lieu of the FAA bill and other things. It's a complement to it, and it's a complement that takes a small amount of public seed money, puts it into a revolving concept, and leverages anywhere from 6–10 times that amount of money so that you go from $25, $35, $40 billion of initial investment up to $600, $700, $900 billion of private sector stake. If done right, Mr. Chairman, this bank can change the playing field for our country. It would finance projects from high-speed rail to seaports. In today's newspaper, there's a big article, I can't remember if it's the New York Times or Washington Post, but it talks about the difficulties we're having right now in getting high-speed rail out there. And one of the reasons is the freight competition for a dedicated track. We need to build dedicated track for high-speed rail. That's what they have in France, that's what they have in Japan and Germany and places. And until we get there, we're not going to have a first-rate modern transportation system for our country. So I just close by saying, you know, this can be run in open, transparent manner by experienced professionals. It can have meaningful congressional oversight. We could even sunset it, which is something that I propose, so that nobody fears that we're building some long-term, eternal federal bureaucracy, but rather it has a purpose. It brings us back to par, and then we figure out whether we're going to be a country with a capital budget or how we're going to proceed from the future. Americans have always been builders. You know, we built the Transcontinental Railroad. We built the Panama Canal. We built the interstate highway system. We went to the moon. But for the last 25, 30 years now, we've lacked adequate investments in that building ethic. And the result is we've been without a strategic plan for all of that period of time. And I believe a National Infrastructure Bank and the commitment of this Congress can change that and put us back onto the path that President Eisenhower noted when he signed the interstate highway system. And he said, together, the united forces of our communication and transportation systems are dynamic elements in the very name we bear, United States. Without them would be a mere alliance of many separate parts. That is the direction we've been moving in. I hope we'll put an infrastructure bank in place, reverse the course, strengthen America's competitive posture in the world, and give our citizens the economy and the quality of life that they deserve. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.